Jesus of Nazareth bears a lot of titles under his name: the Son of God, the Christ, the Messiah, the King of Kings, but one of these seem to puzzle Christians today, and that's because it's not quite as self-explanatory as the others. Jesus, many times in the Gospels, is called the Son of Man. This at first seems pretty self-explanatory, but when read literally in English, it doesn't make much sense how this can be a title for Jesus specifically. Isn't Jesus the Son of God? I mean, yeah, that Joseph guy was his dad, but we all know God's his real father, right? And if the title Son of Man means as it's read, am I not the Son of Man? My father is a man, I think. Your father is probably a man. Are you the Son of Man? A common belief is that it is a counterpart to Jesus' title of being the Son of God, thus confirming the Christian belief that Jesus is both God and man. However, Jesus' usage of the term Son of Man can at times be not so clear. Sometimes he uses it as a self-reference: the Son of Man will be handed over to his enemies and be crucified. But sometimes he uses it to refer to a figure of grand power rather than a mere man. Like a lot of things in the Bible, the usage of a word or term differs depending on which book you are reading. This might be difficult for some to understand, but you have to remember that the Bible is not a book, but a collection of books written by different authors with different beliefs, yes, writing at different times, at different places. The term Son of Man occurs around 107 times in the Hebrew Bible, though it's sometimes translated differently. In some contexts, the Son of Man, or Ben Adam, quite literally translates to human being, or man, or mortal. In the book of Ezekiel chapter 2, Ezekiel is addressed as a mortal, though the footnote says another way of reading this is Son of Man, and it seems as if this phrase is to be read literally. He said to me, O mortal, stand up on your feet and I will speak with you. He said to me, O mortal, eat what is offered to you, eat this scroll and go, speak to the house of Israel. This way of addressing Ezekiel happens many times throughout the book, and your Bible will likely use the term mortal rather than Son of Man. So when Jesus uses the term Son of Man, does it refer to an ordinary mortal then? Well, of course not, especially since Jesus has very not so mortal descriptions of the Son of Man in the Gospels. But this is an example of how the meaning of words and terms differ depending on which book you are reading. Now let's turn to something more familiar. The book of Daniel has a brief mention of the Son of Man. For some context, Daniel is considered as an example of apocalyptic literature. Apocalypticism is generally associated with belief in the end times, but that's eschatology, which is also what this book is about. Apocalypticism means a revealing, and books under this category generally include stories of prophets or men having visions from God or about the divine realm. Another example of this is the book of Revelation. In Daniel chapter 7, we first encounter the Son of Man in one of Daniel's visions. I saw one like a Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, and he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. From those two verses alone, we get a whole new meaning for the Son of Man, and this would be seen in other eschatological texts that feature the Son of Man. Now, the reason why this figure is called the Son of Man, or more accurately in Daniel, one who was like a Son of Man, is because the term Son of Man is a Semitic idiom for man. This basically means that this divine figure appears in the form of a man in Daniel's vision, which, may I remind you, is meant to be figurative and symbolic, as is with Daniel's other visions and dreams. Confusion arises though in the subsequent verses, as other scholars believe verse 18, which mentioned the saints of the Most High, is the in-text explanation for the one who was like the Son of Man, meaning the two are the same. Other people would probably interpret saints of the Most High as the people of Israel who remained faithful under persecution, while some might believe that the saints of the Most High simply refer to angelic beings. However, the book of Daniel's Son of Man, or one who was like a Son of Man, is meant to contrast the people of Israel to its enemies, the other kingdoms who are called beasts. God essentially defeats the beast-like kingdoms who are the enemies of the Israelites and brings glory to the human-like Israel. Remember the sequence of events here. Daniel has a vision at night where he sees one who was like a Son of Man. He then asks and gets an explanation for his vision where the one who was like a man figure is now called the Holy Ones of the Most High. If Son of Man and the Holy Ones of the Most High are interchangeable terms, then this makes a lot of sense, as verse 18 says the Holy Ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever, identical to verse 14. This tells us, therefore, how the author believed God would vindicate Israel from its enemies and give them power and glory, something we do see in the end of Daniel in the final chapter. So originally, Daniel's Son of Man likely did not represent a messianic figure or even a divine judge. The Son of Man, therefore, is not a title in the book of Daniel, nor does it describe a singular figure or person. Regardless though of who or what the Son of Man truly is in Daniel, later authors reinterpreted these few verses, and the later Christian writers would do so as well. We can't talk about the Son of Man or apocalyptic Judaism without one of its most important products, the Book of Enoch or 1st Enoch, which is more like a compilation of various books rather than one book. Despite not being in your Bible, the Book of Enoch is important for understanding 1st century apocalyptic Judaism, as this book could offer a good reflection of what people of its time believed. If you remember, Enoch is a man briefly mentioned in the book of Genesis chapter 5. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after the birth of Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 days. Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him. In the similitudes of Enoch, or chapters 37 to 71 of 1st Enoch, we're introduced to a figure who is called the Son of Man. It's important to note that Enoch is pseudonymous, where the author writes in the name of someone else, in this case Enoch, but the text switches from first to third person from time to time, so keep that in mind. And there I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool, and with him was another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angel who was with me, and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man. Who was he, and whence he was, and why he went in the head of... Who was he, and whence he was, and why he went in the head of days? And he answered to me, That is the Son of Man who has righteousness, with whom dwelleth righteousness, and who revealeth all the treasures of that which is hidden, because the Lord of spirits had chosen him, and whose lot had the preeminence before the Lord of spirits in uprightness forever. Later verses then tell us that Enoch is the Son of Man, and he came to me and greeted me with his voice and said to me, You are the Son of Man who is born into righteousness, and righteousness abides over him. And the righteousness of the head of days forsakes him not. And he said unto me, He proclaims unto you peace in the name of the world to come. For from hence has proceeded peace since the creation of the world, and so it shall be unto thee forever and forever and ever. This kind of language is more familiar to us modern readers, as it's similar language one might use to describe Jesus as the Son of Man. So you can see perhaps where the later Christian writers could have gotten their theological influence from, or perhaps this shows us of an emerging belief within 1st century Judaism. A common perception among many Christians for a very long time now is that the Son of Man as a title refers to the Messiah or the Anointed One. Now that title alone deserves another video, but I'm sure we all have an idea of what the Messiah is. Christians today anyways believe the Messiah is God, and so Jesus being God makes as much sense as him being the Messiah then. However, we've established that the term Son of Man did not always denote messiahship or a figure of salvation. In the Gospels though, Jesus does use the term Son of Man as a self-reference, but not always. Take a look at this verse from Mark. Notice the usage of the words me and my, obviously talking in the first person. Then halfway through that same sentence, Jesus identifies the Son of Man as a separate figure with his own Father and his own coming time. It does however get confusing real quick when you consider that the Father is meant to be God, and if the Son of Man is the Son of the Father who's God, wouldn't the Son of Man also be the Son of God then? Take a look at this verse next in chapter 14 when Jesus stands before the high priest. Caiaphas asks Jesus if he is the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One, or the Son of God. Jesus answers, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Jesus helps us out here a little bit, one, by telling us that he is the Son of God, and by separating the Son of God from the Son of Man as different and separate entities. As in his prophecy to Caiaphas, he tells us that he will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. The Gospel of Luke, who writes decades after Mark and the destruction of Jerusalem, changes this to be from a prophecy or declaration to, well, just listen. They said, If you are the Messiah, tell us. He replied, If I tell you, you will not believe me, and if I question you, you will not answer me. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. All of them asked, Are you then the Son of God? He said, you say that I am. For the Gospel of Mark in particular, the author seems to believe that Jesus, in fact, is the Son of Man as seen in certain sayings such as chapter 2 verse 10, 2 verse 28, and the Passion predictions after Peter's confession in chapter 8. However, there's this strange internal conflict where the author is adding in sayings from Jesus from one source, one where he is the Son of Man, and perhaps another where Jesus refers to the Son of Man as a figure separate from himself or the Son of God. This phenomena sometimes happens in the same chapter. Chapter 8, for example, where Jesus predicts the suffering of the Son of Man, then later distinguishes himself from the Son of Man who is about to come in the end of time. For Mark then, the Son of Man is not only an eschatological judge, but also a messianic title. The Gospel of Matthew, which copied a good chunk of Mark, changes a few things from Peter's confession. In chapter 16, which you might want to read parallel to Mark 8 as they're about the same, Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do the people say the Son of Man is?" Compare this to Mark where Jesus simply asks, "Who do the people say I am?" So by this time, Jesus and the Son of Man figure get fully merged into one. I said Matthew copied Mark, so let's take a look at the verses I mentioned a while ago and their Matthean equivalent. Mark 8:38 is not present in Matthew, though it does reappear in Luke 9. Matthew makes it even more clear that the Son of Man and Jesus are one by changing the Passion predictions. In Mark, Jesus teaches in verse 31 that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering. In Matthew's version, the author substitutes the Son of Man for the pronoun he, referring to Jesus himself more clearly. In a passage found in both Matthew and Luke, which is probably from Q, Matthew's version says in verse 11, "Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." Luke's version in chapter 6 has Jesus saying, "the Son of Man," rather than the first person pronoun my. In the Gospel of John, Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, and the Son of Man are fully synonymized. None of these sayings from John, though, can be read in parallel to the synoptics. This merging of the Messiah and the Son of Man can be seen in the first verse I showed you at the start of this video. The crowd answered him, "We have heard from the law that the Messiah remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man?" Here, Messiah and Son of Man are used interchangeably, it seems. So in the Gospels, the Son of Man has two meanings or origins, one being as a self-reference for Jesus, as by the time the authors are composing their Gospels, Jesus and the Son of Man have either been merged or are seen as one. The second likely being an interpretation of the figure in Daniel 7:13, where the one who was like a Son of Man is understood in a messianic sense. At last we arrive at the end. Who is the Son of Man? Or rather, what is the Son of Man? Well, as I've tried to establish in this video, the Son of Man wasn't always perceived to be a singular being or even a divine judge from the cosmos. The Son of Man wasn't even always a title. But reinterpretation of these texts inadvertently created new and different understandings of what or who the Son of Man is. And this is just another example of the evolution of beliefs within religion. I'd like to say, before ending, that this video was not made with the intention of disproving Christian theology. Jesus may have well been the Son of Man he preached about for you, and that's perfectly fine. The goal of this video is to outline the beliefs people had and how it evolved as time went on. It would be unfair and even ignorant to assume religious beliefs or practices always remain the same, or that religion is a monolith. That is to say, not all people of one group or religion believe the exact same things. Not all Jews subscribe to the apocalyptic and eschatological view of Daniel or 1st Enoch. But that is all. Thanks for watching.